For almost the entire story of being human, we were not the top of the food chain. We were on the menus. There was a time when a person walking across open ground was less like a hunter and more like a slow, soft snack that happened to walk on two legs. And the animals knew it. In this video, we're going to meet the things that hunted our ancestors. A cat with teeth like carving knives that may have specialized in eating early humans. A leopard whose bite fits a 2-million-year-old skull so perfectly it solved a murder mystery. A crocodile so fond of hominins that scientists literally named it the man-eater. An eagle that snatched a child out of existence and left the evidence in its eye sockets. And a snake so ancient and so dangerous it may have rewired the human brain itself. We'll dig up how we even know any of this, the tooth marks, the punctured skulls, the caves that turned out to be pantries. We'll get into the huge scientific fight over whether early humans were killers or the killed, and the one stubborn scientist who flipped the whole story upside down. Then we'll get to the good part, how a weak, clawless ape with no fangs and no armor clawed its way to the top anyway. And at the very end, the uncomfortable twist, because the animals that hunted us never really stopped. Some of them are still doing it today. So how did we survive? And what did being the prey do to us? Let's start at the beginning with a dead child, an eagle, and a mystery that took 80 years to solve. Let's rewind to 1924 in South Africa. A box of rock and fossils lands on the desk of a young anatomist named Raymond Dart. Inside is a skull. A small one. It belonged to a child, an ancient, ape-like child, somewhere around 3 years old when it died, and somewhere around 2 to 3 million years old by the time Dart got his hands on it. He named the species after where it was found. We just call it the Taung Child. Now Dart looked at this child and had a big idea about who killed it, and we'll come back to that idea, because it started one of the biggest arguments in the history of science. But for now, hold one question in your head. What actually happened to this kid? For decades, nobody was sure. Then, much later, researchers took a very close look at the damage on the skull, little punctures and scratches, and in particular, some strange marks in the bone at the bottom of the eye sockets. And here's where it gets grim in the quietest possible way. Those marks match something very specific. Today, in African forests, there lives a bird called the crowned eagle, a genuinely enormous raptor that hunts monkeys and drags them up to its nest to eat them. When scientists studied the leftovers under crowned eagle nests, they found monkey skulls with the exact same damage. Torn marks in the eye sockets from talons and a beak digging in to reach the soft parts. The Taung Child wasn't buried. It wasn't a peaceful death in a cave. That child was carried off by a bird. 2.5 million years ago, one of our distant relatives, a toddler, was hunted from the sky, and the only reason we know it existed at all is that the eagle happened to drop the skull somewhere it could fossilize. Sit with that for a second, because it sets the tone for this entire story. To the animals of the ancient world, we were not special. We were food that occasionally used tools. So let's meet the rest of the guest list. And we'll start with the one that solved a murder. In the caves of South Africa, places with names like Swartkrans, there are thousands upon thousands of animal bones and mixed in among them the bones of early humans. For a long time people assumed that meant these caves were our homes. Cozy little hominin apartments. That assumption was completely wrong, and one skull proved it. There's a famous fossil, just the top of a young hominin's skull, and in it are two neat, round holes. Punched clean through the bone, a fixed distance apart. For years nobody could explain them. Then a scientist named Bob Brain had a beautifully simple idea. He took the lower jaw of a fossil leopard, and he lined up the two big stabbing canine teeth on that jaw with the two holes in the skull. They fit perfectly, like a key in a lock. That's not a home. That's a leftover. Leopards, then as now, drag their kills up into trees or into caves to eat in peace, away from hyenas and lions who'd steal the meal. Those bone-filled caves weren't where ancient humans lived. In a lot of cases, they were where ancient humans were eaten. The picture flipped in an instant. We hadn't found our ancestors' houses. We'd found the predators' dining rooms. And the leopard was just one option on the menu of things that could kill you. The ancient world was absolutely stacked with big predators, and most of them were bigger than the versions we have now. There were cave lions, a species of lion larger than today's, that ranged across Ice Age Europe and Asia. There were cave hyenas, powerful enough to crush bone, hunting in packs and hauling carcasses back to their dens. There were cave bears, and while those were mostly plant eaters, a 900-pound animal that wants your cave is a problem you cannot argue with. And I've been putting off the ones with the truly famous teeth. The saber-toothed cats. There wasn't just one, there was a whole family of them stalking the ancient world. There was Homo therium, long-legged and built to run down prey in the open, and possibly to hunt in groups, which is a nightmare all its own. And there was Megantherion, shorter and stocky and terrifyingly strong, an ambush killer that used those blade-like fangs to bring down animals much bigger than itself. These cats shared the landscape with our ancestors for a very long time. Imagine growing up in a world where that silhouette, those two curved teeth, was just a normal thing you had to watch for at the tree line. But the one I really want you to meet is a cat called Dinophilis. It's sometimes nicknamed the false saber-tooth because it had those long stabbing upper teeth but shorter and sturdier than the famous saber-tooth cat. It was about the size of a jaguar, built for ambush, powerful in the front legs, perfect for grabbing and holding something that struggles. And here's the unsettling part. Bob Brain and others noticed that Dinophilis fossils keep turning up in the same places as early hominin fossils. Some researchers floated a genuinely creepy idea that Dinophilis might have been a specialist. That killing things like us might have been what it was for. Now that's not proven, it's a hypothesis and a debated one. But even as a maybe, it does something to you, doesn't it? The thought that there was, walking around, an animal that may have looked at our ancestors the way a house cat looks at a laser dot. Not as a rival, as a job. And it wasn't only the land and the sky. It was the water. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, one of the most important fossil sites on Earth, researchers found hominin bones with distinctive bite marks. Big ones. In 2010, scientists described a species of extinct crocodile from that very site, and its bones sat right alongside our ancestors. They gave it a name that leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. Crocodiles anthropophagus, which translated means roughly, the man-eating crocodile. Think about what that implies. Every single day, our ancestors had to drink. And every water source was a shop with one product and a hidden checkout. You need the water to live. The thing in the water needs you to live. That tension, thirst versus ambush, played out at the edge of every lake and river every day for millions of years. The crocodile barely had to evolve at all. It was already perfect. It just had to wait. And then there's the oldest enemy of all. The one that might have changed our brains. Snakes. There's a scientist named Lynn Isbell who put forward a genuinely mind-bending idea called the snake detection theory. The argument goes like this. Snakes were among the very first serious predators of small early primates, tens of millions of years ago, long before the big cats showed up. A snake doesn't chase you. It hides and it waits, and the only way to survive it is to see it before you step on it. So Isbell's theory says that the constant, deadly pressure of not stepping on snakes may have pushed primates, including our ancestors, to evolve unusually sharp, detailed, forward-facing vision. Good eyes, good depth, and a brain wired to snap to attention at a certain S-shaped squiggle in the grass. In other words, part of the reason you have such good eyesight and part of the reason a garden hose can make you jump out of your skin might be tens of millions of years of snakes trying to eat your ancestors. Which brings us to the obvious nagging question. How on earth do we know all this? These animals are long gone. Nobody filmed it. And the honest answer is that this is detective work, a field called taphonomy, which is basically forensic science for things that died a very, very long time ago. The clues are written on the bones themselves. A predator's tooth leaves a different mark than a stone tool. A tooth makes rounded pits and scratches and punctures. A sharp flint blade leaves fine, straight, V-shaped cut lines. Crushing and gnawing means a bone-cracking hyena. Two matching punctures mean canine teeth. Even the way bones pile up tells a story. A cave full of only the meaty parts of animals all chewed the same way is a predator's rubbish heap, not a home. Scientists like Bob Brain spent decades learning to read this, comparing ancient damage to what modern leopards and hyenas do to bones today. Even predator droppings help. Fossilized dung coprolites can contain the digested bits of the meal, sometimes including hominin remains. It's about as grim a way to find your ancestors as exists, but it's real evidence. Bit by bit, from bite marks and skull holes and bone piles and yes, ancient poop, researchers reconstruct who was eating whom. But here's where the story gets really human, because scientists didn't always read the bones this way. And this is the great argument I promised you. Go back to Raymond Dart and that Taung Child. Dart looked at the fractured, damaged bones piling up in these African caves and came to a dramatic conclusion. He decided our ancestors did this to each other. He imagined early humans as violent, weapon-wielding killer apes bashing skulls with bones and antlers, and he argued this murderous instinct was the very thing that made us human. He called it, chillingly, our predatory transition from ape to man. This idea exploded. It escaped the science journals and got into books and films. The killer ape, the notion that deep down we're naked, aggressive murderers who conquered the world through violence, became a huge cultural story in the 20th century. It felt true to a lot of people. It felt tough. It also happened to be built on a misreading of the evidence. Because along came Bob Brain, the same leopard jaw guy, and he asked a quieter, better question. What if the humans didn't make those marks? What if the marks were made on the humans? When he actually matched the damage to the teeth of leopards and hyenas, the killer ape story collapsed. The fractured skulls weren't trophies of our violence. They were evidence of our vulnerability. We weren't the monsters in the cave. For most of the story, we were the ones being dragged into it. And I think that flip is one of the most important ideas in all of human origins, because it changes what our story even is. We didn't rise to the top by being the biggest bully on the plains. We're not descended from unstoppable killers. We're descended from the nervous, the watchful, the ones who survived being prey. Our ancestors' superpower wasn't ferocity. It was not getting eaten. So how did they manage it? How does a soft, slow, clawless ape survive a world absolutely full of things designed to kill it? The first answer is the simplest: don't be alone. A single ancient human on open ground is a meal. A group is a problem. Many pairs of eyes spot the ambush. Many voices raise the alarm. And a cluster of primates screaming and throwing things is genuinely enough to drive off a big cat that would happily take a lone target. We are here today because our ancestors stuck together, not out of sweetness, but because scattering meant dying. The herd instinct isn't weakness. It was the original security system. The second answer is time of day. A lot of the deadliest predators, the big cats especially, do their best work at night. So our ancestors leaned into the day. Forage, travel, and hunt under the sun when you can see the threat coming, and hunker down somewhere defensible when the dark belongs to the things with better night vision than you. Being a daytime animal in a nighttime predator's world is a quiet, constant strategy for staying alive. And then comes the big one. The thing that, more than almost anything, tipped the balance. Fire. At some point, more than 1 million years ago, our ancestors learned to control it. And the evidence for very early fire shows up at some of the same South African cave sites, with burned bones over 1 million years old. Fire cooked food, yes. But fire also did something else, something that happens after dark when the whole ancient world got dangerous. Fire kept the monsters out. Picture that circle of light on the darkest night 200,000 years ago. Inside it, warmth and safety and faces. Outside it, in the dark, the eyes. Almost every large predator is instinctively afraid of fire. So for the first time, our fragile ancestors had a wall the leopard wouldn't cross. They could sleep. They could sleep on the ground deeply, without one of them being taken in the night. And a species that finally gets to sleep safely is a species with the energy to grow a very expensive, very clever brain. But our ancestors didn't only hide and huddle. They learned to fight back at a distance, and that changed everything. Start with a thing so basic you never think about it. We stand up. Standing on two legs let our ancestors see over the tall grass like a meerkat scanning for danger, spotting the crouched cat before it could spring. And standing up freed the hands. Hands that could now carry and throw. Because here is a genuine human superpower that no leopard has. We are the best throwers in the animal kingdom. A well-aimed rock or a sharpened spear delivered from 10 meters away by a creature that could kill you at 0. And this wasn't a late invention. At a site in Germany, archaeologists pulled beautifully made wooden throwing spears out of the ground that are around 300,000 years old, balanced at the front like a modern javelin built to fly. Now picture that in the hands of a whole group. Not one nervous ape but 10 of them spread out, shouting, and a hail of sharp sticks coming in from every direction. Suddenly the maths flips for the predator. The meal is no longer worth the wound. A big cat with a broken jaw starves. So our ancestors made themselves expensive, too costly to eat. That's a kind of power that has nothing to do with fangs. Put it all together and you get the strangest apex predator the planet has ever produced. Not the strongest. Not the fastest. Not the best armed by nature. We won by cooperating, by watching, by staying up in numbers, by carrying fire, by making weapons out of sticks and stones, and above all by talking, by being able to tell each other there is a leopard by the water, don't go there. Information passed between minds is a defense no other animal on Earth had. We didn't outmuscle the predators. We outthought them together. But here's the twist that I find genuinely beautiful and a little haunting. All that time spent as prey, it didn't just shape how we lived. It shaped what we are. Right now inside your head is deep, ancient wiring for fear. A part of your brain that reacts to a threat before you're even consciously aware of it, that jolt you feel before you've finished the thought. That system was built by predators. It's there because the ancestors who had a good version of it lived to have children, and the ones who didn't. It goes deeper than that. Think about the fears that feel irrational today. Snakes. Spiders. The dark. That prickle on the back of your neck when you feel watched. Big cats. Deep water. Almost none of those match what actually hurts modern people. We're far more likely to be harmed by cars and sugar than by pythons. And yet the old fears are stronger, faster, and harder to switch off. Because they are not about your life. They're about your ancestors' lives. You are carrying, right now, the survival instincts of millions of years of very nearly being eaten. Even our best traits might trace back to the teeth in the dark. Our intense sociality, the deep need to belong to a group, the pain of being excluded, makes perfect sense for an animal whose survival literally depended on not being separated from the herd. Being cast out, alone on the open plain was a death sentence. So we became a species that feels loneliness as something close to an alarm. The predators didn't just chase our ancestors. They helped carve the shape of the human heart. And now for the part that should put a chill in you, because it's the reason this isn't just ancient history. We tend to talk about all this in the past tense, the animals that used to hunt us back when we were weak. But that relationship never actually ended. It just went quiet. For a lot of the world and for most of human history, being hunted by wild animals stayed a very real, very recent fact of life. Take the tiger. In the early 1900s, in the hills of Nepal and India, a single tigress killed an astonishing number of people. Over 400 deaths are attributed to her before she was finally stopped. 400. One animal. That's not a fairy tale from a cave. That's barely a century ago. Or the lions of a place called Tsavo in Kenya, who in 1898 brought railway construction to a halt by hunting the workers night after night, dragging them from their tents in the dark. And remember the crowned eagle, the bird that took the Taung Child 2.5 million years ago. It's still out there, still hunting monkeys in African forests. And there are modern, documented cases of these eagles attacking children. Even in at least one report, a child's remains found up in a nest, echoing that fossil skull with an accuracy across 2 million years that is honestly hard to think about. The eagle never got the memo that we'd become powerful. To it, a small human is still exactly what a small human always was. And it isn't only tigers and lions. There's a famous case of a single leopard in the Indian Himalayas in the 1920s that was blamed for around 125 deaths, stalking villagers along the mountain roads at night, so bold and so practiced that people were terrified to leave their homes after dark. One cat, 125 people. The leopard from the 2-million-year-old cave and the leopard on the modern mountain road are, behaviorally, the same animal doing the same thing to the same prey. Us. Crocodiles still take hundreds of people a year at the water's edge, the exact same ambush at the exact same kind of watering hole that killed our ancestors at Olduvai. Leopards in some regions have killed more than 100 people each. The point isn't to scare you away from your bathtub. The point is that the thing we call ancient, the state of being prey, is not actually behind us. It's dormant. We built cities and lights and walls and put a lid on it. But take the lid off and the old rules snap right back into place. So let's come all the way back to that little skull on the desk in 1924. A child 3 years old carried off by an eagle 2.5 million years ago. For a long time, that skull was used to argue we were born killers. But the truer story it tells is the opposite, and it's a better story. We were born survivors. We are the descendants of the ones who were watched and hunted and taken, and who, against everything, found ways to live anyway. We didn't earn our place at the top of the world with claws or fangs or armor. We earned it huddled together in the firelight, whispering warnings to each other in the dark, refusing to be eaten one more night. Every one of us alive today is the end of an unbroken line of ancestors who every single one, managed not to become somebody's dinner. That's not a small thing. That is, quite possibly, the whole story of us. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If millions of years of being hunted are still sitting inside you, in your eyes, your fears, your need to belong, that jolt when something moves in the dark, then how ancient are you, really? Because the next time you feel watched in an empty room and can't say why, that isn't nothing. That's an old part of you, doing the one job it was built for. Keeping you alive. Just in case the eyes came back.